Before he joined the infamous 27 Club, Jimi Hendrix lived hard and fast. In the year leading up to his death, the legendary guitarist was in a dark place and briefly in the custody of kidnappers. Jimi Hendrix released 3 iconic albums during his short life, but during his final year, he barely recorded anything at all. In truth, he seemed to be confused about where he wanted to go musically. It didn't help that, at the time, he had a revolving cast of backing band members, having never settled on a set of musicians after the Jimi Hendrix Experience broke up.
I think a lot of people who were close to him saw that he was getting ready to go through another phase that would have been a strong change.
The musician gave friends and reporters conflicting information on what he wanted to do next. Louder Sound reports that while attempting to leave his manager, Michael Jeffery, Hendrix started working with a new producer, Alan Douglas, who specialized in jazz. But their attempts went nowhere, and Douglas ultimately ended their working relationship. In his Hendrix biography, Roomful of Mirrors, author Charles R. Cross stated that about 9 months before he died, Hendrix was indicating that he wanted to concentrate on blues music, and that he would no longer be a lead singer. Reportedly, the musician told his girlfriend Kirsten Nefer that he wanted to take 2 years off completely, then only play the acoustic guitar. He also told a reporter he looked forward to when he could stop performing and just write songs. Conversely, Mike Nesmith of the Monkees ran into Hendrix at a party, where the Purple Haze singer stated he intended to go more R&B. In short, Hendrix knew he needed a big change of direction and was trying hard to figure out which way to go. Of course, he would never get the chance. In May 1969, Hendrix landed in Canada to play a concert for 10,000 fans, but he probably wasn't expecting to be out on bail when he stepped on stage. At the airport earlier that day, Hendrix was found to have a bottle in his bag containing 3 packets of heroin and a pipe with hash residue in it. He was arrested, facing 2 counts that could get him 7 years in jail each. Hendrix was allowed to leave the country before he returned to face trial in December 1969. The musician's defense was that he had been given the bottle by a fan and must have just thrown it in his suitcase without knowing what was in it. Hendrix explained both while on the stand and to the Toronto Star during his trial that he had tried drugs before but had grown out of the habit. Years later, though, a fan of Hendrix admitted to the Globe and Mail that when he arrived in Canada for his drug trial, she and her friends supplied him with some marijuana. Regardless, after 3 days, the jury deliberated for 8 hours before finding him not guilty. Hendrix played Woodstock at 9 a.m. on August 18, 1969, exactly 13 months before he died. After that, he took a long break from performing live, only doing 5 shows over the next 9 months. But Louder Sound reports that Michael Jeffery pushed Hendrix to get back on the road because that was where the money was.
We'd put tickets on sale, they would be gone in a couple of hours, and this was the time before Ticketmaster.
Once he started touring again in April 1970, Hendrix was traveling almost non-stop until his death. He performed everywhere from Hawaii to Georgia to Sweden, playing huge festivals and smaller solo gigs. During this period, he had some of his most iconic and disastrous performances, and those around him could tell the effort required was taking a toll. Over the July 4th holiday, Hendrix played a Woodstock-like outdoor festival in rural Georgia, where the Dothan Eagle reports that he was the highest-paid performer. He got the second highest fee for playing the Isle of Wight Festival in August, according to the Greenville News, but he probably didn't think that one was worth the money.
Billy Cox on bass, Mitch Fisher on drums, and whoever's going to be playing guitar.
According to Tony Brown's Hendrix The Final Days, radio interference during his set interrupted several songs, and the audience only wanted to hear Voodoo Child's Slight Return. But that gig was a dream compared to the nightmare that was the Open Air Love and Peace Festival in West Germany that September. Famously, Hendrix's last official gig, it was ruined by biker gangs. As Blaine T. Brown explained in his book Dazed and Confused, America Confronts the 1970s, they robbed audience members, shot a stagehand during the musician's set, and set Hendrix fleeing to safety. Hendrix's final live performance was less than 48 hours before he died, a jam session at a London jazz club. About a month after Woodstock, Hendrix was allegedly kidnapped. Details are foggy, as Hendrix was reportedly so high that he didn't seem to realize it happened, but several sources have corroborated the story, including one with ties to the mob. John Roberts was a former Gambino family associate who later ran drugs for the Medellin cartel. In a tale from his 2011 biography, Hendrix was at a wild party and looking for drugs. 2 men offered to give him dope and took the guitarist to a second location. They then contacted Michael Jeffery and demanded a ransom, which some believe involved ownership of Hendrix's record contract. After an over-the-phone threat from Roberts, though, Hendrix was returned safely with no ransom paid. For his part, some think Jeffery set the whole thing up to look like a hero. Whether or not Hendrix had children is up for debate. Hendrix did sleep with 2 women who later gave birth to children and claimed he was the father, but the issue of paternity wasn't settled by the time Hendrix died. Tamika James was born on February 11, 1967. As Rolling Stone reports, her mother Diane Carpenter had been living and touring with Hendrix the previous year, but it seems the 16-year-old didn't try to tell Hendrix about the child until 6 months after her birth. Hendrix was non-committal as to whether he believed he could be the father, and in the last year of his life, Carpenter and her lawyers became insistent that he take a blood test to help establish paternity. Despite several meetings regarding this matter taking place in 1970, the test had not been done by the time Hendrix died, so James was not allowed to inherit the musician's estate. James Sundquist was born in October 1969. His mother, Eva Sundquist, had only hooked up with Hendrix on one occasion, but Swedish courts eventually acknowledged his parentage. Since there was no paternity test involved, though, the ruling is considered invalid in the United States. Hendrix died when the boy was less than a year old, and the pair never met. Though he may have only had 2 children, Hendrix was seeing multiple women in the year before he died. Famously, Monica Dannemann was his companion for the last week or so of his life and was who found him unresponsive.
His pulse was normal, he was breathing normally, but he was sick, and I couldn't get him awake.
As noted in Room Full of Mirrors, that same week he reconnected with an old flame, model Linda Keith, and gifted her an expensive guitar. In his final year, he also spent time with Kirsten Nefer, Devin Wilson, and Carmen Barrero. Some of the women were aware of the other ones, and Nefer even overheard a phone call Hendrix had with Wilson where she argued with him about their relationship. Strangely, Hendrix appeared to have proposed to at least 3 of these women in the year before he died. He gave Barrero an engagement ring for Christmas in 1969, and asked both Nefer and Dannemann to marry him during his final week. Only Dannemann seemed to think Hendrix was serious about going through with the marriage. He also tried to get back with his ex, Kathy Etchingham. Said to be the only woman who didn't have ulterior motives about being with Hendrix, Etchingham has spoken about how even after she broke up with him in 1969, he would continue to call her when he was at his lowest. According to the biography Electric Gypsy, in March 1970, Hendrix flew to London to try to get Etchingham to leave her new husband. Etchingham told the BBC that the day he died, he even invited her to come to his hotel, but she never showed. Hendrix was under a lot of pressure in the final year of his life, and those around him noticed the stress and exhaustion were making him angrier, more distracted, and more erratic. According to author Blaine T. Brown, the strain also caused Hendrix anxiety and ulcers. These conditions didn't help his mood, and he continued to use both drugs and alcohol as well. His fragile mental and physical state were made especially apparent by a few incidents that occurred in the months leading up to his death. As noted in Room Full of Mirrors, Hendrix spent Christmas of 1969 with Carmen Barrero. He was drinking heavily, and after gifting her expensive jewelry, he threatened to throw her out a window before hitting her with a bottle. Barrero had to go to the emergency room to get her resulting injuries treated. A month later, Hendrix played Madison Square Garden as part of a benefit concert. Because of delays with other groups, it was almost 3 a.m. when he went on stage. Witnesses disagree about what substances he had taken that night, but he was clearly on something. As the Miami News reported at the time, he played 2 songs, started talking gibberish to the audience, then sat down in front of an amp and went silent. He had to be let off the stage. By his final year, Hendrix no longer trusted Michael Jeffery, and for good reason. Louder Sound reports that at various points during his time with Hendrix, Jeffery owed the mob money, had a hit put out on him by someone else he owed, and used offshore tax havens to avoid paying U.S. taxes. In fact, there are several sources that claim he had something to do with Hendrix's death.
Everybody was very suspicious of Mike Jeffries, and I think with some genuine reasons.
As the Wrap notes, Jeffery spent lavishly and had Hendrix touring relentlessly to bring in cash. What's more, he didn't want Hendrix to perform with the musicians of his choice, but instead insisted that he reform the experience. Hendrix believed Jeffery might have made sure he was busted for drugs in Canada to maintain a financial hold over him, and Band of Gypsys drummer Buddy Miles swore he saw Jeffery give Hendrix some bad acid before a gig. Finally, at the end of his rope, Hendrix was making moves to leave his manager, and the pair were openly hostile. In the last few months of his life, the musician was essentially hiding from Jeffery. Allegedly, the day before he died, Jeffery was informed that Hendrix was officially changing managers. Hendrix's Electric Lady Studios is an iconic music location in New York City's Greenwich Village, but just weeks after it was finished, its founder died. It's a shame Hendrix didn't live to really use the studio, since it was built to his exact specifications with his recording process in mind. As American Masters notes, he and his manager bought the location initially to turn it into a nightclub.
Jimmy was neither Italian or white, but he would have a great difficulty operating an establishment of that nature on 8th Street.
Another member of the team pointed out that Hendrix spent an exorbitant amount of money on studio time. This was no exaggeration. They reportedly spent $60,000, more than $500,000 today, just to record Electric Ladyland. so Hendrix changed his plan. While he didn't get to spend much time at Electric Lady Studios, he did record his final track, Slow Blues, there on August 20th, 1970. The studio officially opened a few days later, with major stars like Eric Clapton, Patti Smith, Ronnie Wood, and Steve Winwood attending the kickoff party. But according to Ultimate Hendrix, some guests remember Hendrix didn't seem to want to be at the party, nor did he seem excited about leaving for Europe the next day. Hendrix's lack of enthusiasm at the party could have stemmed from the fact that he seemed to know he was going to die soon. According to Edward Willett's Jimi Hendrix Kiss the Sky, a little over a year before he died, the guitarist went on a 9-day vacation to Morocco with some friends. While there, he got a tarot card reading from a clairvoyant. She flipped over the death card, which, as she explained to him, doesn't actually mean someone is going to die. Instead, it can mean a symbolic ending or rebirth will occur. But according to his friends, this explanation didn't matter, and the then 26-year-old Hendrix became convinced he would die before 30. He spent the final year of his life counting down the months he thought he had left, although the number would change erratically. When he ran into a journalist he knew just days before he died, The Independent reports that he told her, "I'm already gone." On a similar note, Hendrix also reportedly left his former manager, Chas Chandler, a message on his answering machine, ominously asking for help. A poem was also found in the hotel room where he was discovered unresponsive. Possibly the final words he wrote, one line read, "The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye. The story of love is hello and goodbye until we meet again." If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.